Ready?
I'll go ahead and welcome everyone. So good morning. My name is Ashley Leary. I am the Member Services Manager for United Way of Pennsylvania. And we just want to welcome both our United Ways and our nonprofit partners to today's webinar, supporting the ALICE population in increasingly volatile times. Like I said, this webinar is being recorded. So if there's anyone who was unable to join today, feel free to send that to anybody who's unable to make it. We'll also share some resources with this after today's training. But as many of you know, United Way of Pennsylvania launched the new ALICE report earlier this month. So if you are interested in learning more about those numbers, whether at the state level or your county, your township, your borough, you can find the most up-to-date information on uwp.org/ALICE. There's an interactive map that can take you more in a deeper dive into what ALICE looks like in your community. But with that, we are joined by our partner for today's webinar, York College of Pennsylvania. If you are not familiar with York College is a private college in York, Pennsylvania, with more than 70 baccalaureate majors and over 30 professional graduate degrees and certificate programs. But I want to thank and introduce our presenters, Dr. Laura Steck and Dr. Michele Yoder from York College for really their time, their efforts in preparing today's webinar. This has been a fun process. But we appreciate having you here and are very excited to learn. So I will turn it over to you both.
And again, my apologies for the delay. We are excited to be here with you today to discuss strategies for supporting the ALICE population. My name's Laura Steck. I'm an associate professor of sociology at York College. My areas of specialization in teaching and research include focuses on race, class, and gender inequalities. My local involvement, my community involvement, has particularly been organized around serving and creating awareness regarding children and families who are economically marginalized. I've worked with Big Brothers Big Sisters, communities and schools, junior achievements, and also with a team of colleagues where we've been facilitating poverty simulations for a variety of local organizations in the York area.
And my name is Michele Yoder, and I'm an associate professor of strategy and business administration here at York College. I'm also the chair of the board of Life Path Christian Ministries, York's rescue mission and homeless shelter. Last year, Life Path provided over 140,000 meals and over 60,000 nights of shelter. At Life Path, I have more exposure to ALICE than you might guess. 50% of our clients are employed. So here's the agenda for today's webinar. We'll have a brief recap of some of the facts about ALICE and a description of the current landscape. And then we'll talk about 3 challenges that you may be facing when you're trying to support ALICE in these volatile times, including reaching them, resistance to seeking help, and partner instability. And we'll talk about some strategies for overcoming them. We'll present some case examples. We'll ask you to present some case examples as well, and give you a little bit of time to generate some ideas, and then we'll end with some time for Q&A. So in today's session, we're going to examine psychological and systemic barriers that prevent ALICE individuals from seeking support and apply trauma-informed approaches to help reduce stigma. We'll identify effective outreach strategies for connecting ALICE households to resources. We'll evaluate the potential impact of shifts in federal funding on partner agencies and think about how to adapt to that. And we'll give you some time to start developing tailored approaches that reflect your unique context, assets, and challenges. So now I'll turn it over to Laura for a quick recap of information about the ALICE population.
So, as I'm sure we're all aware, a growing proportion of American families are living paycheck to paycheck, caught in between federal poverty guidelines and true financial security. These are our childcare workers, nursing aides, retail clerks, delivery drivers, and substitute teachers. They are essential to our communities, but too often invisible to public policy and economic recovery plans. They are ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, employed. In 2017, Alice represented 24% of the Pennsylvania population. More recent 2023 data indicate that the Alice population has grown, with 28% of all Pennsylvanians occupying this liminal space between the poverty line and economic stability. Today, nearly half of all Pennsylvania residents live below the Alice threshold. We'll move to the next slide, please. Thanks. So challenges to serving the Alice population must be understood in a broader societal context. Over the past several decades, economic shifts in the U.S. have been characterized by rising costs of living without comparable increases in median wages and salaries. At the height of the industrial era, increases in the cost of living were positively correlated with increases in wages and salaries. So this means that everyday costs of living like housing, food, clothing, transportation, as those rose, employers typically increased their workers' wages and salaries commensurately. However, beginning in the late 1960s and into the 1970s, as the U.S. began to experience deindustrialization, stable manufacturing jobs that paid a sufficient family wage, so one that enabled families to meet all of their expenses and to have a little bit left over to save, began to decline. Jobs lost in the manufacturing sector were largely replaced with lower paying and less stable jobs in the service sector. The spending power of American families, from low-income families to middle-income families, has decreased significantly. It's now more difficult to meet all household expenses on a single family wage, and even more difficult to save. Families have developed a variety of coping strategies, however, in this volatile environment, including relying on 2 or more incomes to make ends meet, working longer hours, working second and third jobs, and potentially going into debt. Despite these broad structural shifts that clearly cannot be blamed on individual level shortcomings or irresponsibility, ideologies of individualism and meritocracy continue to dominate American cultural and political discourse. We're also living in uncertain times with regard to the state of public and private funding. Oops, I'm in the wrong spot here. The increasing complexity of household needs has contributed to the growing experience of family instability as well. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the reliance on technology and education skyrocketed, fundamentally shifting how schools operate. However, many parents cannot afford the necessary technology for their children, and numerous underfunded school districts struggle to provide these resources. This issue is further compounded by the interconnectedness of local economies, housing markets, and schools, where economic disparities often limit access to essential educational tools and opportunities. Can we move to the next slide, please? Oh, I'm sorry, go back. My apologies. Sorry about that, Michelle. So we're also living in uncertain times with regard to the state of public and private funding streams. A recent spate of executive orders has led to the freezing or cancellation of federal grants and contracts for many nonprofits. The ambiguity surrounding the implementation of these orders has created legal uncertainties and compliance difficulties for organizations. Moreover, reductions in federal agency staff have caused delays in grant processing and communications, further complicating nonprofits' abilities to plan and execute their programs effectively. Reports indicate that the current administration is even considering challenges to the tax-exempt status of certain nonprofits, potentially undermining their financial viability. We've also witnessed decreases in charitable giving. Since 2017, charitable giving in the U.S. has declined, largely due to tax cuts and the Jobs Act, which significantly increased the standard deduction. As a result, fewer taxpayers itemize, and thus fewer can claim the charitable deduction. The Charitable Giving Coalition reports that this change has reduced household giving, especially among middle and lower income donors. Reductions in federal support and charitable giving have had a complex impact on foundation funding streams as well. Nonprofits that do not receive federal funding are experiencing indirect effects from recent federal budget cuts. As the federal government reduces grants to various programs, private foundations are inundated with requests from organizations seeking alternative funding sources. This surge in demand strains the capacity of private funders, making it more challenging for all nonprofits to secure necessary resources. Consequently, even organizations that have traditionally operated independently of federal support are facing increased competition for limited private funds.
Now that we have an understanding of the current landscape, we're going to talk about three challenges and their potential solutions that are involved in supporting the ALICE population in these really volatile times. The first challenge is getting the word out to the ALICE population about the resources and services that are available. The current landscape likely adds to this challenge. On February 12th, Elon Musk reposted a meme of a smiling woman with the caption, "Watching Trump/federal programs, knowing it doesn't affect you because you aren't a member of the parasite class," claiming that to be the reason why, quote, 90% of America loves Doge. These types of communications from the administration and those closely associated with the administration perpetuate the stigma that Laura will be talking about soon, making it more difficult to reach ALICE. In addition, the highly publicized funding cuts and the proposed federal budget currently making its way through the Senate have and are poised to cut funding and or eligibility for healthcare and housing, which likely gives the impression to ALICE households that they are even less eligible for services than they were previously. Now, the current landscape is exacerbating challenges that already existed, including a variety of communication gaps. At LifePath, we have some repeat guests who are chronically unsheltered for a variety of reasons. And when they come to us, they know exactly what services are available and they know what types of help to ask for. We have also increasingly been seeing guests who've never been unhoused before and have no idea what resources and services are available or how to go about accessing those resources. And I'm sure you've all seen these different types of clients as well. The lack of pre-existing knowledge hinders individuals from seeking out information on services. They also won't understand the acronyms and jargon that may be used by service providers, government entities, and others who really reside in that landscape. People who fall above the federal poverty line but below the ALICE threshold are likely to believe they don't qualify for services and support. As a result, they won't seek out information and may even discount information they receive as not meant for me or not applicable to me. As we see in the 2025 ALICE report, members of the ALICE population often find themselves with significant caregiving responsibilities or working multiple jobs to try to make ends meet. This could leave them with limited time and opportunities to hear about and look into available resources. Trust is also an issue. Trust in a number of institutions is eroding. Evidence from a 2016 study showed that perceived income inequality leads those on the lower end of the income spectrum to experience lower levels of generalized trust. Trust in the US government has been declining since the 1960s and continues to be quite low. There's increasing distrust in higher ed. And I'm sure that all of us on this call have received those lovely emails or voicemails trying to scam us, right? This all leaves ALICE population with few messengers that they feel they can trust. Finally, the digital divide creates a communication challenge. The most recent ALICE data reveal a correlation between the percentage of households falling below the ALICE thresholds and those without home broadband, which is consistent with these findings from the Pew Research Center, which show that lower income individuals remain less likely to have reliable digital connections. The lack of connections make it more challenging to reach ALICE individuals. So that's a lot, right? In light of all these issues that create communication challenges, how can we better reach ALICE? Given the lack of trust in various institutions and the communication gaps I just mentioned, community-based outreach and engagement are really important. The research on community outreach programs revealed that they're most often associated with healthcare, education, and environmental concerns. However, there's lots of practices they use that we can take away and use to help get the word out to the ALICE population about other types of resources and services. Perhaps the most important practice in over 100 years of research in this area is engaging with the community, ideally using a strengths-based collaborative approach. Engagement involves building relationships with individuals as well as groups within the community. Researchers in this field highlight the need to, quote, focus on the active involvement of residents and community members in ways that foster empowerment and capacity building, end quote. So the goal of this engagement is not just to communicate the availability of resources, which of course we want to do, but to also partner with the community to gather information about their needs, understand their lived experiences, identify potential community champions, and build trust. In addition to partnering with ALICE communities, another way to reach them is through partnerships with schools, employers, and faith organizations. I think one of the unique challenges that's likely happening with reaching ALICE is there isn't an obvious place to reach them. For instance, if you're targeting kids, you work with schools. Or if you're targeting retirees, you could partner with senior centers. ALICE's diversity makes it necessary to spread a wider net. Just a second here. So let me share an example from my own experience. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm on the board of LifePath, where we give guests a safe place to sleep, hot meals to eat, and connections to resources to help them move through their season of homelessness. We have found partnerships to be incredibly important. A local employer discovered that some of their employees who do fall under the ALICE threshold were food insecure and/or unsheltered. We were able to partner with the company to get the word to the employees about how we could help them and about other resources available in the community. We were also invited to do a lunch and learn with HR employees, and several employees have become frequent volunteers and donors. So one goal of partnerships could be to get the word out about 211. PA 211 is a great way for ALICE to get information about the different services available in their communities. Partner organizations might be willing to publicize PA 211. In addition, you can encourage partners who provide services to share details and updates on program availability with PA 211. Last but not least, when it comes to reaching ALICE, and honestly to reaching anybody, how the message is crafted and delivered matters. So I'm sure many of you have heard the acronym KISS. I'll keep it polite and we'll just say it stands for Keep It Simple, Sweetie. A couple of quick tips for this. Partner with members of the community to ensure the message is clear and culturally sensitive. And I've found that generative AI tools like ChatGPT are pretty good at rewriting text to align with a particular reading level or style. Including images and videos can be very powerful. Just make sure the videos are pretty short because ALICE individuals may have limited time, and because of the digital divide, may also have quite literally limited bandwidth. Messages to ALICE will be more effective if they're framed around ALICE's strengths and utilize a collaborative approach. So working on crafting messages like that could be an opportunity to engage the community. I mentioned earlier the need to cast a wide net for partnerships. This also applies to increasing ALICE's awareness of available resources and services. Multiple communication channels increase the likelihood of ALICE individuals hearing and responding to information. Creating communications that reduce stigma and overcome resistance is also a really important aspect of messaging. But I'm not actually going to talk about this point. Instead, we're going to switch back to Laura, who will go into more detail about resistance to asking for help and how to overcome it.
Thanks, Michelle. So the reluctance to seek out help is not natural or biological. It's cultural. We live in a culture that has evolved over the past 400 or so years around values of rugged individualism and staunch independence. There are so many other societies around the world organized around interdependence and a collective sense of responsibility for the well-being of all in the community, both in smaller pre-industrial societies and much larger industrialized democracies. We too can do things differently. Even though stigma is not natural or inevitable, the experience of stigma is very real. As a result, many individuals who are truly in need and have access to assistance will decide not to seek it out in order to avoid the shame or humiliation that stigma can bring. I'm talking here about kind of receipt of social welfare programs, which is a different population, but the research on people who are recipients of or eligible for social assistance programs suggests that most people do not like being on social assistance programs because they don't enjoy the stigma. I have a personal story to share as well. When I moved back home in 2004 with my husband and two children at the time, I was working on my dissertation, and we had moved in with my parents so that I didn't have to work and I could finish writing my dissertation. We took a significant hit to our family income. Although we didn't have to pay rent at my parents' house, we didn't have much income other than my husband's hourly salary, or excuse me, hourly wage at BJ's Wholesale. So financially, we were kind of in a significant, difficult state. So an aunt of mine suggested that I apply for WIC, Women, Infants, Children, and we qualified. And I did receive WIC for a period of time, but the stigma that was associated with that experience led me to stop receiving WIC earlier than I should have. So the stigma when I would go to the grocery store and pull out the WIC checks, whether it would be from cashiers, even though cashiers are typically trained not to treat any customers any differently, or from fellow shoppers who would make comments about me being there with children on welfare. We really benefited from those WIC benefits, but the stigma was really unbearable and we stopped receiving WIC. So stigma is very real. The willingness to seek assistance is also shaped by cultural and community dynamics. Research on racial ethnic differences in participation in social welfare programs exist, but these variations do not necessarily reflect underlying or ingrained cultural differences between groups. For instance, we see higher rates of participation in some programs such as SNAP and TANF among African Americans relative to population size, but this reflects disproportionate rates of poverty, not necessarily greater willingness. Under-enrollment is common among Latinx communities, especially among eligible non-citizens and mixed status families. Language barriers, complex paperwork, and misinformation can also play a role. Lower participation rates among white Americans overall are due to the fact that white Americans are disproportionately non-poor. However, when we compare participation rates by both race and socioeconomic status, participation rates among Black and white Americans are proportionately the same. We also see that Americans in urban settings are more likely to seek help than those in rural settings. This is likely due to population density. In urban areas, individuals and families are more likely to see and know other people who receive assistance. In rural areas, this is typically not the case due to sparse population density. In addition, urban areas are typically more politically progressive than rural areas and therefore more likely to have positive regard for assistance programs. And while the research I'm referencing here pertains to individuals and families eligible for means-tested social welfare programs, these trends can definitely apply to members of the ALICE population as well. So resistance to seeking help can most definitely be linked to the desire to avoid stigma. This means any efforts to increase ALICE willingness to seek out and accept assistance during these volatile political and economic times must involve concerted efforts to challenge this stigma. One strategy for doing so would involve strategic work to break down artificial distinctions between the deserving and undeserving. Now I'm going to move on to some information about overcoming resistance to seeking help. So first, trauma-informed and dignity-centered approaches. practicing trauma-informed care that also recognizes the distressing impact of economic instability is vital. Dismantling our notion that dignity can only be achieved through full financial independence is necessary as well. Moreover, the vast majority of ALICE individuals and families are not struggling as a result of personal shortcomings or bad decision-making. Larger economic shifts beyond any one individual's control have led to growing economic instability, even among solidly middle-class families. This realization can potentially reduce individuals and families' tendencies to blame themselves for current economic hardship, enhancing their willingness to access available resources. We can also work to normalize help-seeking behavior. Efforts to reduce stigma through increasing awareness of the broader social forces leading to financial instability among so many Americans today can help reframe help-seeking as normal and necessary in some cases. Highlighting widely used social programs like Medicare, public schools, and tax credits emphasizes that all Americans rely on assistance at some point. This awareness can potentially serve to reduce the stigma attached to help-seeking behaviors. Oh, can you move on to the next point, please? To reduce the stigma around help-seeking, organizations serving ALICE can invite individuals and families who've successfully used its resources to serve as ambassadors, sharing their stories with pride to inspire others. Engaging charismatic community advocates who understand the broader economic shifts can also reframe resource scarcity as a widespread issue, encouraging collective action and reducing blame on individuals. There are numerous models of peer support programs in the fields of mental health, student support in public and higher education, and re-entry support services.
All right, so a final challenge we're seeing in these really volatile times is the potential for instability in partner agencies due to the funding realities Laura mentioned when she described the current landscape. The current volatility in the nonprofit sector has resulted in some nonprofits losing funding or even potentially losing nonprofit status. And there is a great deal of uncertainty about what types of funding future executive orders may target. In addition, the proposed federal budget involves further cuts or changes to eligibility for programs such as Medicaid. The budget's currently in the Senate, and it's not clear what the final result will be. The extra volatility that we've experienced this year comes on top of longer-term ongoing issues that nonprofits have been experiencing. As mentioned earlier, nonprofit giving has been trending downward. That's definitely something we've experienced at LifePath, and I'm sure many of you have seen it happening as well. In addition, there's always some uncertainty about what to expect from state and local budgets. That uncertainty may be particularly heightened as state and local governments attempt to adapt to the changes going on at the federal level. Finally, there are risks that might not be immediately obvious, but could still contribute to instability. Specifically, organizations that don't rely heavily on federal funds may still find themselves affected. We're seeing this at LifePath. We don't have any federal funding, but there are other organizations that we partner with that have lost funding or may lose funding in the future. If those partners become unable to provide services such as assistance with housing or access to healthcare, at LifePath, we're likely to see more guests looking for shelter. We're also likely to see guests needing meals as they can no longer afford food due to increases in other expenses. And with impacts on housing, we're also likely to see our guests staying longer because we're not able to place them into safe housing as quickly. So even though we aren't directly impacted, LifePath will see impacts on our ability to provide services and our guests' ability to access downstream services such as affordable housing. The current state of volatility has exposed many nonprofit organizations to risks to their funding and their tax-exempt status. So the first step to building resilience in your partnerships is to assess your own risk and ask your partner organizations to do the same. And I'm pretty sure some of you have already done this. The National Council of Nonprofits has published a handy checklist for conducting such a risk assessment. The link to this risk assessment is in the handout that you'll be receiving later. So let me just quickly walk through the steps though. So the first step is to do an inventory of the federal funding that your organization receives. And I mean, you want to be really thorough about that, right? There's some obvious things that you know that you get, but just make sure what other things might be there. Make sure that you understand the terms of any grants or contracts, and make sure you understand under what conditions they can be terminated or canceled. Review all the executive orders, the draft budget, the executive branch memos that focus on any issue areas that are covered by your organization or that could impact your organization. So the National Council of Nonprofits keeps a running, regularly updated. When I looked at it yesterday, it had just been updated the day before. So regularly updated list of executive orders that could impact the nonprofit sector. Review your organization's mission statement and 990s. So you're looking for anything that might conflict with any of the executive orders. Do the same thing for any of your public-facing profiles, your website, your social media presence. If you've got executives or staff or high-profile volunteers that post regularly on social media. And here you're checking for the same thing. Is there anything there that's going to conflict with the executive orders? And then if you find that you need to make changes to anything, you want to make sure that any of your key stakeholders understand why you made the changes you made and what it means for the services you will provide. So maybe you're just changing how something's worded on your website, but you're providing the same services. Make sure that your clients are aware of that so that reduces anxiety. And to these steps, which are all great, I would add asking your partners to do a similar assessment so that you can understand those hidden risks where, again, your organization might not have a lot of exposure to federal funding and may not have a lot of risk in that area, but your partner agencies may. And having an understanding of that will enable you to partner better with those agencies. So once you have a better understanding of the more obvious and the hidden risks, you can turn your attention to trying to minimize those risks. So this first step, I don't need to tell you this one, right? We would all love to diversify our partnerships and our funding sources more. But we're talking about it because it's even more critical given the recent volatility. And we could spend all day talking about diversifying funding, but we don't have all day. So I'm going to hit some of the high points. And on your handouts, there will be a link to a site containing kind of a process and some strategies for thinking through how to diversify funding. It was published by a CPA firm. I found it to be very useful, and so we're sharing that with you. So some of your better known options, in addition to traditional fundraising, include things like foundations, grants, corporate partnerships. Of course, the volatility is affecting corporations as well. With the on-again, off-again tariffs, businesses are being pretty conservative about their spending, whether that's on things for their company or things for nonprofits. And foundations, Laura talked earlier about how they're being impacted. So some other less traditional options include what's called legacy or planned giving, peer-to-peer fundraising, special events, and earned income. So legacy or planned giving is encouraging people to include your organization in their estate planning, basically in their wills. It can feel really awkward, but we've been finding at LifePath that estate giving has been a lifeline to us in some of these, during some of this volatility. Let me take a drink here for a moment. So peer-to-peer fundraising involves getting your supporters to help raise money on your behalf. So you might have volunteers, you might have board members that can tap their networks, whether that's in person or online, and help raise money for your organization. You could even look at crowdfunding sites as an option as well. Special events like concerts or golf outings can both help raise awareness for your organization and help raise money. And earned income is looking for opportunities to sell products or services. And so it can be as simple as selling like branded merchandise, right? But these opportunities can come in really unexpected places. So I'm going to actually give you a few LifePath examples, and then I'll stop talking about LifePath, I promise. But these surprised me in a very pleasant way, because I'm like, how can a homeless shelter earn income? We're not going to charge our guests, right? But our staff have found these amazing ways to earn income in really unexpected ways. And I can't take any credit for any of the good things that they do. They do an amazing job. So first, our local hospital system used to have this issue where they would discharge people who were unsheltered, and those people would they'd probably wind up either on the streets or in our shelter, but they needed some follow-up care, not enough to go to a nursing home, but we weren't positioned to provide that care. And so the patient ended up right back in the hospital. Well, that cost the hospital money, and they didn't like it. We didn't like that our guests were not doing well. And so we now have a partnership with them where they pay us to maintain these beds for people being discharged from the hospital. Our case managers partner with healthcare providers to make sure that they're getting the follow-up care they need, and they don't end up back in the hospital. So it's saving the hospital money, it's serving our guests better, and it's a revenue stream for us. So it's been a win across the board. It's been an amazing partnership. Another one is we have this fantastic data analyst. So we gather data about our guests. So we have an enormous amount of data about like why they're in the shelter, what led to them being unsheltered, all this different information. And he has an incredible wealth of knowledge about how to analyze data and use various software packages. So we actually have sent him out as a consultant to other organizations who want to access his expertise. And the most recent one, which I think is really cool, our food services team does this amazing job of, it's like that TV show you may have seen, Chopped, where they like, here's some weird ingredients, now make something. Like, that's our food service team on a regular basis, and they do an amazing job. So they now offer catering services to other organizations, including many of them that have taken us up on it are nonprofits, but that's also producing another stream of earned income. So earned income can be a viable source, even for organizations that you look at and think there isn't anything that they could do to earn income. So those are just a few of the ideas for diversifying funding. Diversifying your partnerships can also be helpful. And one way to do that is to generate some cross-sector collaborations. So I've got a couple of Alice examples here. Anne Arundel County worked with a company that does labor market analysis and used Alice data to figure out how to connect the Alice population with local workforce needs. And in another example, so this one's in Connecticut, the United Way of Central Central and Northeastern Connecticut partnered with the Hartford, which is a large insurance company, to help them do research and to publicize 211. And in fact, the Hartford did a national training with all 3,000 of their claims reps so that they would be aware of the value of sharing 211 with customers who disclosed needs. And if you'd like to see more examples, look at some of the awesome things that the United Ways around the US are doing. You can see it on the United for Alice website. So if you go to that website and you just click on in the menu, you can click on Alice in Action, and there's all sorts of examples. So finally, I do have some advice for creating strong partnerships. So this model, called the 4C framework, you'll see why in a moment, was developed by Russ Koff, who's a colleague of mine at the University of Wisconsin. And so he applied it to alliances between firms. But I think it definitely applies to partnerships between nonprofits and other organizations, whether those are other nonprofits, firms, for-profit firms, or government entities. So the 4Cs are 4 conditions that all start with the letter C that contribute to the success of partnerships between organizations. So the first C is complementary resources or skills. So you're looking for partners that can enhance your strengths, providing resources or skills you may lack. And likewise, your partner should be able to contribute something you need to the partnership. So you're not looking for partners that are just like you. You're looking for partners that can fill in gaps and where your strengths can help them. The second C is congruent goals. So the goals that each party has for a partnership have to align. They don't have to be the same goals. And in fact, they're probably likely not to be, but they can't be in conflict. So going back to the example of the Hartford, their goal was to provide better service for their customers. The goal of the United Way of Central and Northeastern Connecticut was to make more people aware of 211. They were totally different goals, but they were congruent. They didn't conflict with each other. The third C is compatible cultures. So the partners need to have cultures and communication styles that are going to mesh with each other, allowing for effective collaboration. You've probably experienced those types of partnerships, whether it's 2 organizations or whether it's 2 individuals, where there's just a disconnect in how you operate. And that makes things so much more challenging. So you're going to look for compatibility. And the fourth and final C is change planning. From the outset, potential partners should discuss and plan for how the partnership is likely to evolve over time. So think about, like, how long is this going to last? What conditions might change, and how might we need to change the partnership to adapt to those conditions? So we've covered 3 challenges that you could be facing while supporting Alice in these volatile times, and some strategies for overcoming those challenges. So Laura is now going to share some case examples.
So Michelle and I were doing a bit of exploration of the various types of programs and resources that United Ways across Pennsylvania offer the Alice population. I'm going to highlight 2 United Ways. United Way of Chester County, for example, provides services such as mobile home tax reassessment, partnering with Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania to assist clients with lowering their local tax burden. And they also coordinate the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, which offers free tax preparation help to low and moderate income households. United Way of Berks County coordinates a variety of resources as well, such as after-school programming, ESL classes, access to food pantries, mental health services, and transitional housing and shelters. And we also wanted to open it up to all of you to share your experiences with the Alice population, the types of programs and resources that your local United Ways have been able to provide. Does anyone want to share?
I know we have a lot of really great examples out there, both from United Ways and even our nonprofit partner agencies that are on the phone. You all are working with Alice populations as well. We invite anyone to share some of the work that you're doing or new programs. I know there are new programs that have come out recently. Yeah, Emily.
Hello. Yeah, we have recent this school year, we tried a partnership with one of the school districts, taking our community health worker initiative, which we have, which helps individuals get insurance and a regular place to receive care. And we sort of made a more intentional referral program from the school district to our community health workers. So if they had a student who needed immunizations in order to stay in school or needed more follow-up care after a physical or after a dental appointment or needed glasses, the school social worker getting permission from the parent could then make that connection between the family and the community health worker. And it has been very beneficial. We keep getting very positive feedback back from the social worker on how this has worked. In addition to serving I think it's 48 students that have been referred, there have been 9 other family members, either, an aunt, an uncle, a parent, or another sibling that have also been identified then as needing services. So that was our intention all along, that we could maybe get to the families by first serving the children with this connection. So it's been very positive, and we're hoping we'll be able to move into other school districts with it.
Mary Lou?
Hi, and sorry, I can't turn my video on. I have really bad Wi-Fi where I am, an internet connection. I'm with the United Way of Beaver County, and we recently partnered with Job Training for Beaver County to create a program called United Works, which is a workforce development program specifically targeted to Alice. Job training has provided traditionally up to $8,000 in financial assistance per student for various programs at the local community college, as well as up to $500 in supportive services for union apprenticeships, like work boots, tools, things like that. And also, they provide funding to the union apprentice programs just to help with those costs as well. We identified that there was a huge gap between their income eligibility and the ALICE threshold. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars sometimes in earned income. And so we started this program, and the United Way is going to provide that same level of financial assistance to the people who fall between job training's income eligibility and the ALICE threshold. So, this goes right along with that resistance to seeking help and reaching them. We've had this program going since April. So far, we have one person enrolled. Job training thought there would be an influx of people. I didn't think that there would, and knew we had a lot of work to do to reach the ALICE population. But we are working with the housing authority, the community college, the unions, of course, but also a lot of just the community organizations that work in the neighborhoods that have a higher percentage of ALICE workers and who are the trusted leaders in those neighborhoods. I think it's going to take a long time for the program to really gain awareness, but I also think that just getting a few people enrolled in the program will then help it take off because they will tell their friends. And then my concern is, will I have enough money to fund as many people as might enroll in the program? But that would be a great problem to have.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple in the chat, and I'm guessing that those won't be visible on the recording. So maybe I could just quickly share this. So Nikki Ferrier said that United Way of Bucks County provides what's called the Lift United program. So it helps people lower their interest rate on vehicles, improve their credit, get into a lower interest loan on a car by matching the down payment of up to $1,000. And Jared Stewart says the United Way of Southwestern PA has a college emergency financial assistance fund that is a one-time up to $1,000 payment to help college students with various expenses, including utility bills, kind of something blocking here. Okay, rent, vehicle repairs, car payments, childcare, among other things. Aimed towards first generation and non-traditional students, but open to any student in need. Those are great examples too. All right, so if nobody else wants to share, what we're going to do next is I want you to sort of turn your attention to how anything you've heard here today, whether it was examples, whether it was something that Laura or I said, how could you apply any of that to your organization? So we're actually going to give you a few minutes, like around 5, so short period of time, but quiet time to think and jot down some notes in response to any or all of these 3 questions. Which of these circumstances described so far have you experienced? In what ways could your organization be able to apply the strategies discussed here? What might need to be adapted to your context in order to do so? And what new ideas may have been spurred by the information and examples that were shared this morning? So I'm going to start my very non-precise timer and give you 5 minutes of thinking time starting now. All right. So that was 5 minutes. I know that's a short period of time. But the reason why I wanted to actually take time to think is because, so like my specialty is strategic management, and I've also been a manager. And so I know how easy it is for businesses to get so caught up in the day-to-day of putting out fires that we forget to take time to plan for longer term, like things like risk assessment and things like that. And I know that at LifePath that our staff are even more so, right, right there on the front lines. And you have to be very deliberate, I found, about taking time to do some of this planning that doesn't feel as urgent, but that is very important. So I hope that this gave you a chance to start processing how you could make use of some of today's information. So we have time for some questions, and those can be questions for us. They could be questions for each other. And we would also love to hear some of the ideas you've started thinking about for potentially tailoring what we've talked about to your local context. So please feel free to chime in with any of those things. You can just go ahead and raise your hand. In the chat, Gina Range, who had to run, said that at GSEP, they haven't necessarily fully experienced any of the circumstances, but they're aware of the possibilities, and they're working hard to raise funds in a variety of ways. She said that being an organization that's gender-based, she's very aware of the scrutiny that brings in today's climate, which is a very relevant concern. And Nikki shared that United Way of Bucks County is seeing some of their community partners dealing with the financial instability. Some are experiencing or preparing for cuts in federal funding, not certain what the future is going to hold for them or their clients, which is a sad and a sad reality that we're having to deal with right now. Any questions? Diana in the chat said, can you briefly go over the United at Work program and the support that could be provided to agencies?
Diana, is that specific to what Mary Lou shared with Beaver County?
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Repeat the question again.
Was that specific to what Mary Lou shared with Beaver County?
Yes. So I was just interested into knowing there was something about the I think she mentioned like $500 for certain things, and I just was wondering like how that got rolled out. How that's connected to United Way, Pennsylvania overall, and just kind of what that looked like.
Mary Lou?
Well, yeah, sure. Well, this is just a program for our United Way. We were looking at opportunities to help Alice. We did begin in late 2023 raising money for what we call the Alice Fund. And we initially started doing that. We still operate under the member agency model. So we have 17 member agencies. However, we have a plethora of nonprofits in Beaver County who are serving Alice, who are not traditionally funded by our United Way. So I wanted to find a way to try to help them as well as our member agencies. And that's why we started the Alice Fund. So we've been providing mini grants to a lot of agencies for things like food insecurity, after school programming, a little bit of workforce development, financial assistance for utility bills, things like that. However, that is basically only providing a safety net for Alice. And I felt like we really needed to do more to help our Alice families thrive rather than just merely survive. And one of our board members was a dean at CCB, the Community College of Beaver County, and he had been working with job training, where I had mentioned earlier that they're providing that funding for low income students. And job training was also working with the unions. So the $500 amount came from job training. That is the amount that they have found can be helpful to the union apprentices to buy work boots, special clothing. The carpenters union requires a lot of tools that are very expensive. But for some of the students at the community college, once in a while something comes up, like all of a sudden they need new tires on their car and they can't get it inspected until they buy new tires, and they don't have the money for new tires, and therefore they can't go to campus and attend class. So job training could spend up to that $500 to help the student buy new tires. So there are those one-off kind of situations that the college sort of vets, and then job training vets to make sure it's a valid expense. A lot of times job training will just, for example, pay the tire business versus giving the money to the student. So that's where that came up. What I'm hoping is that with a lot of our agencies who are providing services to Alice, that some of their participants and clients could benefit from this program and eventually won't need the nonprofits, and then they can help other people who maybe are on waiting lists. So, there again, I mean, we're probably not going to really see results from this program for a number of years. But we just figured we've got to get it off the ground. Once we figured out that those eligibility restraints were there, we just wrote up a proposal, took it to the board. Thank God they had faith in us, and we started the program. One thing I failed to say, though, is we also gave an Alice mini grant to job training to administer the program, because I'm a 3-person office and we don't know anything really about workforce development other than what I've learned through this process. I also don't want to be doing income eligibility, having to work with the colleges and the unions to get people enrolled and to follow along with them. But job training does a great job of that already. So they figured out how much would it cost them to do this for X amount of students or apprentices. And that's what they submitted an application for. And so we approved that mini grant. So they administer the whole program. I basically sign the checks. But we get to have this program up under our umbrella, which I think just really adds to our relevance in the community and hopefully will help to increase awareness of our United Way in the community. I hope that helps, Diana.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
And I love that example of playing to your strengths or your partner's strengths. So that's a fabulous example of the complementary resources and skills. So thank you.
Yeah, it really is all about collaboration. And like you were saying, finding the partners that align with you. And this was a perfect example of that, because we wanted to help, Alice get better jobs and increase their financial stability. And job training was already trying to do that with the low income population. So it worked out perfectly, and we've become really good partners, and finding that our missions align in even more ways than we could have imagined.
Very nice. Any other questions or examples that anyone wants to share?
I do think it is a nice opportunity, Diana and Mary Lou, of what you shared of continuing to look at our nonprofit partners, including United Ways, our partner agencies. I think Michele had given the example of working with the hospital system to fill beds and to make sure that there's kind of supports as individuals are transitioning through their journeys. I think this is a really great reminder too to continue to look at the work that is already being done in our communities. We're tackling a lot of big issues, right? We're tackling childcare, housing, food insecurity, workforce development. There are so many big scale components that we're looking at in our communities. And if we continue to see how can we work together, how can we transfer information together and support one another and connect with each other with those partnerships, right? Using that 4C framework. I think we can continue to kind of chip away, but just being knowledgeable about what each other is doing in the community. And if there are opportunities of, hey, this is a strength or this is how I can help you, I think we'll naturally continue to kind of weave together of we're a collective in our community that is tackling and supporting the ALICE population. So I do think if you haven't really sat down and connected with your United Ways or with your partner agencies to get those updates of what's going on, this is a really good time to look at that of what's going on in my community. How are things changing based on the environment right now? And almost reevaluating of, okay, where are our needs as they sit currently? So I think that's a really good opportunity and a good reminder. At least one of the big takeaways that I took away from today's webinar.
Well, Laura and I would like to say thank you. We were so happy to be with you today. Thank you, Ashley, for inviting us. And thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. And we hope that this information proves useful, if only to spur additional conversations. And we hope you have a great day. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michele. Thank you, Laura. Thank you all for joining. We will be sending out the recording, some handouts, additional resources. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to support. So thanks so much, everyone.